The man wearing the protective suit opened the isolation door and was immediately shocked by the apocalyptic scene before him. The air is filled with radioactive nuclear dust. The bridge in front of him is completely destroyed, and no complete body can be found. The survivors hiding in the shelter are shocked and grateful. No one expected this world to disappear so quickly. Now, they must bear the responsibility of continuing human civilization in a shelter 300 meters underground. The story's hero, Max, was a wealthy and reckless young man before the disaster, but a car accident completely changed the course of his life. In that incident, Max left his girlfriend who was about to die and fled alone, and in the end, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for manslaughter. After entering prison, Max suffered from grief and guilt, and his immense wealth brought him no comfort, but rather made him a prime target for humiliation, until that day came when his fellow inmates put him in a spinning washer. Max suffered on the brink of death for a full 16 minutes. When he was pulled out, Max felt that all the pains of his life had ended. At that moment, he felt as if he was reborn. He stood up, staggering, and began to laugh loudly at his fellow inmates who had been mistreating him. This brave act impressed everyone. Since then, Max completely got rid of the days of bullying, started exercising regularly, and his outstanding performance in daily intense training and matches quickly earned him the respect of his fellow inmates. And in this dazzling atmosphere, he gradually began to forget the pain. However, happy times are always short. In the 3rd year of his imprisonment, Max suddenly received a notice of sentence reduction. Due to his good behavior during his time in prison, Max can now be released. The resounding prisoner's host said that this man left the prison with elegance, and when he saw his father Rafa standing at the door, Max's expression was very cold. It turned out that the relationship between father and son had been severed since that incident. Suddenly, 2 fighter jets flew over their heads. Rafa told him seriously that to get him out of prison early, he used a lot of connections and resources. Now the external situation is very tense, and he must go with him to a highly secret shelter. Max felt a strong resistance in his heart. He had just gotten out of prison and did not want to return to an underground cage. However, the father anxiously expressed that Max's mother and grandmother had already arrived at the shelter, along with the father of his late beloved. The last sentence made Max pause. He felt it was time to confront past mistakes. On the way to the shelter, Rafa told his son about the origin of the shelter. He met a high-ranking military figure at the tennis club and accidentally learned that a few of the country's elite were secretly building a doomsday shelter. The father spent almost all his assets to obtain a valuable entry ticket. This morning, he received a notification from the bunker manager that the global situation had approached the brink of chaos and requested all residents to enter the bunker immediately. The father and son had barely sat in the helicopter when they received a notification from Civil Aviation Control. It seems the bunker manager's concerns were not unfounded. To prevent the location of the shelter from being leaked, all guests were asked to wear blindfolds during the flight. The helicopter finally landed on a bridge in the middle of the lake, and the staff guided the father and son to the elevator entrance. The shelter was built at a depth of 300 meters underground, relying on a cave formed 45 million years ago, and it can withstand most nuclear attacks. There is also a natural gas field under the shelter that can meet the needs of 45 families for 10 years. It wasn't long before Max and his father reached the shelter's reception desk, where the staff collected their communication devices, explaining that it was to prevent location tracking. The construction of this shelter took 7 years, and the perimeter of the complex alone is 20,000 meters. The internal facilities are highly integrated, with the clothes worn by the residents able to monitor radiation intensity and air quality in real time, while a team dressed in yellow provides service and protection to the residents at any time. Upon entering the reception hall, which can change the external views, Max finally met his mother and grandmother, while his father Rafa focused on the news displayed on the big screen. The Russian defense minister held an emergency press conference, stating that there will be a strong response to some provocative actions. The family went to the restaurant to eat and encountered the family of the deceased friend, which immediately made the atmosphere tense. Max expressed his guilt very sincerely, but his friend Gil's father remained reserved. It is clear that he has not forgiven the killer who caused his daughter's death. The two families were once very close, but after that tragedy, the relations were completely severed. Guillermo politely introduced his new wife, and it turned out that half a year after his daughter's death, his former wife also died in a car accident. Guillermo was an eloquent speaker and showed no animosity towards Max, but his girlfriend Azia's sister was not the same. While eating, she did not hesitate to mockingly question how someone could be so cruel as to leave his girlfriend dying. Max remembered that unforgettable night again, but he did not offer any explanation. When the atmosphere became more awkward, the shelter's servant entered the dining room with the staff and first informed everyone of the bad news, which was that the war in the Atlantic had escalated, and asked everyone to prepare for a long stay in the shelter. Then the servant emphasized some matters that need attention due to the limited number of staff in the shelter. The residents must perform some simple tasks, such as taking their own food and washing the dishes after eating. These things seem simple, but for those wealthy individuals accustomed to luxury, it's not good news at all. Given the dangerous situation outside, everyone had no choice but to temporarily suppress their discontent, as this is not their private home. After returning to the room, Gilmore, who appeared calm on the surface, couldn't contain himself. During dinner, he wanted several times to stab Max in the head with a fork. In Gilmore's view, this killer who caused his daughter's death is nothing but a brazen pretender. The new wife tried to console him, but that was met with a rebuke from Gilmore. In the gym, Max met his girlfriend's sister, Asia. She didn't want her sister to live in hatred, so she took out the mobile phone her friend left at the scene. Asia immediately returned to the bedroom and started browsing the album. Most of the videos her sister recorded showed her in intimate moments with Max, and given the smile on her sister's face, it was hard for her to believe that Max could do something so cruel. Gilmore, feeling depressed, came to the restaurant to drink, but he was informed that each resident is limited to 2 cups per day. He was about to make a comment and suddenly the bar started shaking. Then the restaurant screen began to flicker. In the next moment, the annoying sirens went off. The shelter was under attack. Everyone is requested to proceed to the dome in the basement, as it is the safest area in the shelter. At this time, the entire shelter was shaking violently, and everyone was screaming and running in all directions. Asia made her way against the crowd to the bar, and accidentally saw Max and his father supporting their father to leave. At that moment, she felt somewhat moved, and even felt that Max wasn't that bad. Everyone quickly headed to the elevator, but they didn't expect an emergency to occur halfway, where the elevator lost control and began to fall rapidly. Everyone screamed in despair, but fortunately the emergency brakes were activated in time, saving them from certain death. They exited the elevator in a state of panic and followed the others to the safe area in the dome. The screens in the hall were displaying global news in real time, and the war situation had completely spiraled out of control. With most countries involved in this war, everyone's morale was at its lowest. Has the World War really come? At this time, the attendant stepped up to the platform to inform everyone that the NATO base located south of the shelter had been subjected to a nuclear attack, and due to the proximity of the location, the shelter felt a noticeable tremor. The situation outside is very complicated right now, so everyone is requested to remain calm. At least this shelter is the safest place in the world. But as soon as he finished speaking, mushroom clouds from the nuclear explosion appeared on the screens, and then the signal began to cut out. Even the bridge outside the shelter was destroyed by the blast wave. With a loud noise, the entire hall plunged into darkness. The servant awkwardly expressed that he must go to the control center. The wealthy people in the place began to speak anxiously in low voices, as they had moved to the shelter to avoid nuclear war. But they did not expect this day to come so quickly. When it seemed that the world was on the brink of destruction, Rafa decided to reveal the truth about the incident. In fact, Max did not abandon his girlfriend. He called his father for help at the first opportunity. Rafa rushed to the scene, and to clear his son who had been drinking, he forced him to flee and hide in the forest. But at the trial, Rafa couldn't bear the guilt, so he decided to tell the truth. He didn't want to use lies to help his son evade responsibility. In the end, Max was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This hidden truth greatly shocked both families. The grandmother was angry with Zara for her constant meddling, which caused her grandson to lose 3 years of his life. However, Max's mother stood firmly by her husband. In her view, Rafa's actions were helping the son achieve redemption. At this time, the servant came out to announce that he had just confirmed with the staff that the external antenna had malfunctioned and personnel must be sent to repair it. To keep everyone informed about the external situation in a timely manner, he will send a maintenance team to start the live broadcast. At this time, the security manager and one of his assistants had put on protective suits. Under the anxious eyes of everyone, the two opened the heavy isolation door. The scene outside was like the end of the world, with nuclear dust flying everywhere, radiation in the air dangerously exceeding limits, and even the temperature was continuously rising. When the burnt bodies appeared in the camera footage, everyone's eyes widened in horror, as the brutality under apocalyptic conditions exceeded their imagination. Meanwhile, the monitors issued a warning that the temperature and radiation levels were still rising rapidly, leaving the two with no choice but to hurry in installing the antenna. But during the operation, the technician's gloves stuck to the hot metal railing, so he no longer focused on installing the antenna, but used a screwdriver to tear the gloves. Now it became impossible to complete the task. The manager had no choice but to order the two to return to the shelter. After going through purification and sterilization processes, the technicians entered the isolation room. But due to their torn gloves, they were certainly exposed to large amounts of radiation. The staff quickly shut off the camera. The surviving wealthy individuals became more anxious now. The manager tried to calm them with a few ineffective words, then turned and left the hall. As he passed through the code door, his worried expression disappeared immediately. The employees in the control room began clapping happily. It turned out that all of this was a carefully planned trick. But what was their goal in doing so? Is it just a deception to gain wealth, or a test of human nature in the face of the apocalypse? If you wish to know the answer, please stay tuned. See you in the next episode.